Ready for me? Where do you want me to go?
Stand up right in the middle.
So, first I'd like to welcome everybody who's on Zoom, everybody who's in the audience. The Chief has already spoken to you all, but I want to welcome you all to Faith&Blue, a crucial conversation with those of us who are here and those of you who are on Zoom and some members of our community. We have on our panel, we have Mr. Ryan Ford.
Yes, sir.
He's a pastor in our community. I do know that.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mario.
He's trying to be on Zoom.
Right, he want to be on Zoom.
And be a panel.
Look good, look good. Everything look good. That's right.
Y'all can give it up on Zoom. With your, Then we have our illustrious Chief, Gina Hawkins. You guys know who she is. We have the Honorable Judge Greg Weeks. Okay. And then we have finally Chaplain Sharon Thompson-Jernigan, who is going to be discussing some of the issues that are going on in our country. But we're going to start really quickly with something that we've heard a lot about in our debates, and that's how we should police. And a lot of people have been talking about community policing. I'm not quite certain that we all know what that is. I'm going to let them explain it. Then I'll give just a broad definition of the Chief can actually do that if she'd like. And I'm standing right in front of her right here. But we're going to start just really quickly with what your idea of community policing is. If Chief, you go last.
Yes,
on this,
absolutely.
I don't want you to spoil it. I want to know what the rest of our panelists think community policing is. I know Lieutenant Mwambo told me to get the definition, but I want to get the definition first. Let's kind of like see if we know what it is, what the idea. When you hear community policing, what does that mean to you? And we'll start with Mr. Ford.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for all the audience that is here this afternoon. I believe community policing is in and of what it says, bringing together community for the betterment, not just as we've spoken, or I've said many times, one of the first opportunities that I've ever was introduced to the police was in an environment or in a situation that wasn't to my liking. So I think policing community is building those bridges, building that community for the betterment.
Now, I want to put a note right there.
Sure.
Because right now, not to my liking. I need to know what that is.
Okay, sure.
Hey, everyone. My name is Mario Benavente. And, the first time I heard the phrase or the policing strategy known as community policing, had to come with President Obama's 21st century blueprint for policing, and it included that concept of community policing. And certainly, ideally, we're going to have our officers who are much more in tune to who lives in the areas that they patrol. It's no longer a matter of, is this person doing the wrong thing, or actually, I know that's Miss Johnson's child, and we're not going to be too concerned. We know we can get him home, and we can figure this out a different way. So, kind of that potential for compassion to be a priority for our police is what I understand the concept of community policing to be. But certainly, I feel a lot of concern with just more police turning neighborhood problems into police problems. So I don't think that, the hammer is the best tool for every job. So that's sort of where my questions about the efficacy of community policing comes into play.
Not the judge yet, because you should.
Yeah.
Let's go to Chaplain.
Hello, my name is Sharon Thompson-Jernigan, and when I hear the phrase community policing, I think of the police officers being engaged in that community, getting to know those that you're laboring among, or those that you are out to serve, and not in a negative way, as I heard someone say. So being engaged, building bridges, getting to know those that you're there to serve. When I think of police, community policing.
It's always dangerous to give a lawyer or a judge an opportunity to speak and a microphone. My answer is going to be a little bit longer.
Especially one who has trouble.
Yeah. Can you hear me now better?
Yeah.
Okay. Little historical background. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in what would commonly be called the hood. The meaning of community and policing was a disconnect during that time period because I grew up in the 60s. Interestingly, my father became a police officer and was a police officer for a number of years. The words protect and serve come to mind, and the realization of those words, those words having meaningful purpose for all members of the community, in my mind, symbolizes what community policing is. We've come a long way. As I indicated, I grew up in the 60s. I came to Fayetteville out of law school at UNC in 1977. The old Hay Street was still in existence. I was a member of the Public Defender's Office here for 10 years. Went into practice in what I think was the first interracial law firm in Cumberland County, Parish and Cook, and later became a Superior Court judge. There have been a lot of changes. I think Danny Dixon was the chief of police when I initially came here. So there've been at least 6 or 7, I think, police chiefs since then. I am absolutely thrilled and excited to be part of this conversation because I think it's a much needed conversation. And I applaud the efforts of Chief Hawkins and what the members of the organization are trying to do now in terms of building bridges between all members of our community, because I think that's absolutely important to realizing the true meaning of those words, protecting and serving the members of the community.
Yep.
Chief?
So first, thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate everyone. Once again, if I didn't tell, I told them already, but I want to reiterate how thankful for the invitation that you accepted for being here. And the topic we're talking about, community policing. I have just a little bit of an advantage. Let me tell you why. Just a little bit of understanding a little bit of history of policing, but also being required to truly think about the concept, truly understand, and truly have to work with it. So I'm going to share a little bit. The council requested one of the most experts on community policing to come in and do a presentation on community policing. Just this past Wednesday, I'm sure it's going to be on the website to be able to record it. It was, to me, very awesome because he's a professor. His name is Dr. Friedman. He is actually the chairman of the International Associations of Chiefs of Police on community policing. And he has done his life work talking about studying what exactly is community policing, to the extent in 1992, he wrote a book about it. There was never really a definition, surprise, a true definition, and that was accepted by the International Associations of Chiefs of Police until literally last year. Last year, a definition where all professional chiefs of police said, this is what we'll accept. They tweaked the definition from his book in 1992 that he submitted. And I'm going to read it first, but then I'm going to share what my feeling is about it. The definition says, community policing is a comprehensive philosophy that guides policy and strategy aimed at achieving more effective and efficient crime control, reduced fear of crime, improved quality of life, and improved police services and police legitimacy through a proactive reliance on community resources that seek to change crime causing conditions. This assumes a need for a greater accountability of police, elected community leaders, and the community in general, along with a greater public share in decision-making through the identification of services needs and priorities, and a greater concern for civil rights and liberties. So, what does that mean? What that means to me is I can work all day trying to build relationships, trying to listen and try to hear. But ultimately, my goal is that is empowerment of everyone to say, what do I want? How do I expect to live within the laws that are covering all of us fairly, consistently, and I want to have a say so by having skin in the game, by making the decisions, by listening, by not accepting my neighbors doing this, by taking ownership of my accountability rights as a citizen, resident, not just me as a chief or my officers, it's everybody joining in on conversations.
Okay, and that's great, Chief, and I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, I think this is just my thought, and you guys can jump in. I think that's a lot for the layman person to really understand.
It is.
It is.
Right? So, and I don't think that people can actually engage or participate in something that they don't understand. How do we break down the definition of that? And then we'll go into it a little bit deeper in terms of what we feel about this community opposed to what we see across the country. How do we make that definition? Judge, how do we make that? How do we help cut that down? Because it took a professional group of police chiefs across the country and academicians to come up with that. How do we break it down so that the person in the most economically deprived situation, most economically and educationally deprived situation, hear that and say, okay, I can do that, and I'm gonna join with you. How do we do that?
I think, at least for me, the beginning point is understanding why we are where we are.
Right.
And that necessarily means, by way of example, and this is simply for purposes of making the example.
Right.
The institution of policing in America developed in two different ways geographically. In the South, it developed out of slave patrols. In the North, it grew out of what was initially called the watchmen, and then folks who worked for hire, and eventually evolved into a more professional entity. But the role historically was control. And that mindset for a long period of time became the focal point in terms of what proper policing was, as opposed to inclusion and equity and recognition of common humanity. And I think we're at a point now, historically, given the events that have taken place in our country over the last year or two, that there is a growing awareness of the need to see the institution of policing not so much as a means of control, or from the perspective of many communities of color, a mechanism that is based on bias, rather than an institution that is there to serve and protect. Back to those words.
So,
and I know that's a hard, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
That's a hard conversation to have.
It is a hard conversation,
Yeah.
but, and I understand you. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I want everybody else to. So right now, my question is still the same. How do we break the definition that the chief just gave us
Okay.
about what community policing is?
Yes, sir.
Now, and I agree. We need to understand the historical connotations, all that you just gave us, the two totally, the north and the south, geographically how they were developed. How do we today? How do we serve a child? I'm sorry. Y'all can't hear me out there? I'm sorry, I get carried away. But how do we break that definition down that the chief gave us, all that she gave us? Ryan, Mr. Ford. Hey, y'all, can I call you Ryan?
Yeah, that's fine. Of course. Yeah.
First names are good.
Greg is fine.
No, you're right. I would say you're right.
Chief is good.
I got you, Chief. How do we break that definition?
So I wholeheartedly believe there's so many different components to what an individual may see as community police and different perspectives. So I don't know if there's an absolute way to simplify the definition. What she may be is, I would like to use the term healthy policing. What does healthy policing look like? But I mean, there's so many different components to what community policing may look like that it's very kind of hard to get an absolute commonality on a definition. I think Chief would, you know, she gave us the philosophical, I mean, you know, so
Technical
maybe
definition.
right. Maybe she could.
Let me try to help on how I see.
Right. Because
Every is the empowerment
Yes.
of every
Yes.
person to say, what is my responsibility?
That's what I got out of it.
okay.
What is my contribution?
What can I add to that?
Go, yes.
Because in order for there to be empowered, the community or sectors of the community have to feel
That's right.
empowered. So I agree with you. You know,
Well, I mean, Judge, you mentioned it earlier on that you've seen this change over time.
absolutely.
And I think when we're talking about how do we get the community to sort of not just get engaged, but understand this definition and then figure out different ways to apply it in everyday life, they've got to understand that policing needs to change. Number one, you know, I think a lot of ways people look at certain institutions like they're statues. It's just the way it is. And there's not a lot we can do to improve upon this bedrock of our community, our society. And I think we've stopped, you know, thinking that the police, our government, so many of these entities are above reproach.
Yeah.
There are problems in our criminal justice system, and there are problems in our democracy, and we don't have to pretend them away. In fact, it's probably more responsible, and you're actually being more supportive of your community when you are being critical. And I didn't get a chance to really say much about why I'm up here. It makes sense why our pastor's here during Faith&Blue weekend and why our chief's here and our former judge and our chaplain are here. But I'm a current law student at North Carolina Central University School of Law, and I'm a community activist. You know, I participated in a lot of the demonstrations over this summer, and, you know, there were things that I saw that happened in our downtown that is very similar to what happened across our country, where people were hurting, and there were better ways that our government, our city government, and our community or our police should have done to recognize that hurt in the community. That I don't think that happened. So as we talk about community policing, we have to be honest and upfront and plain about where we go wrong. You're not being critical of the police in a way that's just because you want to rag on them. You're being critical because you expect better and you want them to be held to a higher standard, be accountable, and be a model for the rest of the country. So I guess I just want to make sure that as probably folks out there hearing, you know, everyone is kind of bought in on these certain concepts, community policing being one of them. And I really think that I've got some questions about, you know, even Chief's technical definition when we talk about quality of life. I don't know if the police are the best folks to be dealing with quality of life problems.
I want to add to that real quick.
Go ahead.
So to your point, let me make sure. Do you think the definition I wrote is only for police?
And I understand your point about it being something that the community has to engage with and participate in to help contribute
It's
to
more than
elevating.
It's more than that.
Sure.
The definition is saying it's everyone's responsibility.
Sure.
But Chief, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's why I need, when you say that's the definition is all inclusive, and he's a law student and you're giving him is more than that.
Yep.
How is my son supposed to, how are other people supposed to understand this definition to apply it to their lives so that you get the participation that you're asking for? Because I'm like Mario, I mean, from different vantage points, you see different things.
Sure.
Right? So we're never going to arrive at this one place if we don't understand what that place is. Chaplain, how do we get here?
So I think too, even the definition came from chiefs of police. Is that correct?
Yes.
So inviting people to the table, because if they come from different walks of life, they don't understand.
Absolutely.
I mean, what are you talking about? So inviting them to the table, even when the definite, can we invite them to the table and see what it looks like to them? I did pick out that piece that was taking responsibility of that community if I'm in it. But what does that look like to them? So allowing them to be engaged in what that means to them, to me, bringing them to the table.
Well, and I agree too, but we just got this definition.
Yeah.
But the definition started with academia.
Right.
It didn't start from police.
Right.
It started from the study of history, of the different methods, and saying, how can this get to the point of understanding the different, not just police, your health, where you live, government,
everything,
the laws of the land, everything starts for one individual at a time, truly taking what they can learn one step at a time.
Chief, from an honest place.
We are not going to make that leap overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
How?
Said
We
that, yeah.
are not going to make that leap. What we are talking about is 400 years of history.
Yeah.
Right.
At least.
And the first step, at least in my view, is to know that history,
Yeah.
to acknowledge that history, which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And then having acknowledged it, step back and begin with programs and discussions exactly like this. Okay, this is where we are. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be?
And that's the question.
Yes.
Your Honor. Like right now, we're having this conversation. And from what Mario said about this summer, there's obviously a group of people who feel disconnected with even this kind of form. In order for this to work, there has to be buy-in from everybody.
Because we want to believe that, just as Judge mentioned, just as Chief mentioned, you know, when the community speaks, they're going to be heard. And not only are they going to be heard, but what they said is going to be applied. So when we think not just in Fayetteville, not just with Fayetteville Police Department, but across the country, very few police departments have done anything in response to a lot of the things that happened over the summer. We're not seeing a lot of these folks implementing policy reforms that, just like this definition that has been studied by academics for decades, they've already studied it. They've already looked at the numbers. At this point, it's just a matter of applying it to your police department. So we don't have to act like this is, again, coming out of the blue. We have to study it for another 10 years. The studies have been done. It's high time that we start applying these changes. And even here, can the community say honestly that anything has changed from May 30th to today, October the 6th, the 7th? And if they can't point to it, maybe they have and it's behind the scenes and they're just not aware. Well, then that's part of the issue. Are you making people aware? My understanding is that there haven't really been any changes.
So what you're saying is, you just said it again.
Yes, ma'am.
The changes has happened to the police department.
Absolutely.
Which you still putting it on the police department.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And what the dialogue is, for example, when I say council is having internal, external meetings, they're having discussions of assessment, understanding, getting the education, having the presentation to know this is not a police department. It is a community issue, period.
Chief.
Of policies, direction, understanding, awareness, education.
So,
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was speaking with Bishop earlier today, and I was telling him about one of the programs, and I'm thankful that you brought racial equity training to the department, and you intend to bring Blue-Eyed, Brown-Eyed, Jane Elliott's program here. One of the programs that I'm part of an organization called OARCC, Organizing Against Racism, Cumberland County. There's that word.
Okay.
That loaded word.
That's the right.
Yes, that leads to this. So, but the point I want to make is this. The first program we bought, and a number of officers from Fayetteville Police Department attended to Cumberland County, was the groundwater program. Groundwater is a metaphor. And in that metaphor, you have a pond. And as you come out of your house one day, you see fish dying, and next day more fish are dying. Most people will look at that scenario and say, something's wrong with that pond or with those fish. The reality of it is, it's not the pond and it's not the fish. It's the underground waters, unseen waters that are feeding the pond, polluting the pond, and killing the fish. Those underground waters represent systems, structures, institutions.
Yes.
I agree with you, Your Honor. And I want to stand up, and I'm going to put this right here.
Can I speak? Oh, go ahead.
I want y'all can't see this, but we're talking about this, you know, the racial part that he talked about. We're going to ask in just a few seconds about there being systemic divisions of racism. This room is divided.
Yes.
The white folk over here.
Yes.
And the black folk over here. Now we got this gentleman right here.
Lord. That was how people came in the room.
But in a lot of situations, this is how it happened. And we don't have a white person on the panel right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't.
No, we don't. So in terms of y'all, and I say white and black alike, so that's all right too. Okay? But the reality to this is, in terms of us getting to where we want, in terms of the definition, can you hear me? All of that? Okay. We're gonna figure out how to get this definition broken down.
Yeah, but
Right.
sure. And I don't think that was deliberate by them.
Right. I don't think it was deliberate, but this is what
understood.
happens more often than
Understood.
not.
Yes.
Understood.
Yes.
So to your point, going back to, I think we have to, when we're dealing with, what was I just going to say? It was just there. When we're dealing with community policing, and it is everybody's responsibility, I think we all have to have a responsibility to make sure we have a healthy community, correct? But we also got to be real about where we are in our times, where we are in America, and the police are looked at as the oppressors, and the African Americans or whomever are looked at and feel oppressed. So it's hard for them to reach out. Say that again.
Not whomever. We can stay.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And whoever.
But minorities in general,
Right.
minorities, not just
Right.
African American, minorities in general are looked at and feel oppressed.
Mhm.
So creating that healthy relationship is going to take, I think, has to be the job of those police officers to, again, going back to the first point I made, my first opportunity or first encounter with a police officer wasn't a positive one.
What was that experience?
I was riding my bicycle, get some air. I lived on the west side of Fayetteville, riding my bike, get some air in my tire. Well, there was a stolen bicycle in the area as well. Police officer came up to me. Now, this is my bike. I just got it for Christmas, got a flat tire. I'm trying to get some air on my bike. He comes, he approaches me. Hey, let me check your bike. It was stolen. It's got to be a stolen. No, sir, this is, this is my bike. I'm excited about my bike. Not at all asked to speak with my parents. I was underage. Just, looking back, so many different components were wrong with that initial. So I developed an unliking for the police.
How old?
I was probably about 14,
Okay.
about 14 years old. And so to my point, I think we have to create different opportunities for children at that level age, 6, 7, 8, to get out and meet our officers so that their first encounter isn't a negative one. Again, everybody does have responsibility. I wholeheartedly agree. But if we're honest about where we are, I think it's now their responsibility to step out, because many people don't feel that they can go and have.
There's a difference between saying personal responsibility belongs to everyone. It's another thing to try and, shift the blame when it comes to what we're actually seeing are people losing their lives.
Yeah,
and it's not really up to the community to have to always
it's hard for me to build a relationship when there's a foot on my neck.
So you're saying that everybody has a responsibility, but the question is what that responsibility is. Right?
Say it plainly where the issue is. Say it plainly about, maybe the culture around policing may not be the healthiest one. I still would love to hear maybe at some point in this conversation or another explanation of this thin blue line that we talk about all the time, or that I hear police talk about all the time. And my understanding of the concept is that the police are sort of this barrier between good, safe, happy communities and then anything else that's going to prevent or make that unsafe. And just the idea that you would look at people who don't have access to health care and maybe are using illegal drugs and illegal substances as some kind of evil at the doorstep, getting ready to ruin these nice, quiet communities, or you think that the person who, is, again, struggling and doing things that, are breaking the law, you look at them as, again, something to be vanquished. That's that thin blue line concept, I think, just has the wrong connotation.
The first time I've ever heard of that. One.
that look at it.
What you just said.
Sure.
So, and let me tell you
let me
tell you what I know of the thin blue line. It was created in Georgia by just an officer that wanted to have representation of just officers, supporting officers.
So what is that line dividing?
There's not a divide.
Oh, okay.
It's just a line of officers.
Okay.
There's no divide at all. It was a sign for officers saying, hey, it's symbol. I have jewelry. I have jewelry that just has a symbol, it's rings, just saying, representing, I'm an officer. That's it. And not everybody joins up to be an officer. It's not just a fraternity sorority. It's a lot of dedication, commitment to be a servant. So, and that it was never a negative that got created. Now, mind you, I hear you what you're saying, how you feel, what you've heard, but it's not even that long. It's not that old. When it was created, it's not decades old.
So, Chief, what would you say to Mario if his feeling is like you're supposed to have that thought? Because
if it's feeling, no, it's understandable. I get that feeling because we're in a stage right now. And the couple comments, and I know you've had your hand raised, but So the aspect of this, where we are right now, you're right, where we have been for a minute. I talked to you about Katherine Johnson was the Breonna Taylor of the 1990s.
Right.
Katherine Johnson happened in Atlanta. It was a bad warrant. Things got changed. Laws got changed as a result of that. We don't need to, we're at a stage that is not we're way past the need to do something about the neck. By the time someone's got the knee on their neck, there's too many other things that's happened along the way to change behavior, to change culture, to change expectations from communities. We are way trying to get to the root of a lot of conversation, to the root of that shouldn't be we're way at the extreme. We should be like coming back, no. What is my expectation? Unfortunately, my father didn't let us go outside the yard. So I never experienced officers growing up, period. I didn't know what police officers, bad or good. I thought in my mind they were good.
Here's the thing, and you didn't have an experience, but we have a lot of people who do, and those are very negative. Here's what's interesting for me. In Fayetteville, I don't have right here, I don't even think about anything going wrong, but I travel a lot, right? When I'm in Fayetteville, I got y'all's numbers in my cell phone, right? But that's me. But I got a son, right? He doesn't have that same liberty. So I think at times when we're having these conversations, I was on on Facebook not long ago. And one of my fraternity brothers asked the brothers there, when was the first time you came into contact with the police and they drew a gun on you? The youngest one was 9, riding his bike to his grandma's house to take her a piece of cake that his mama just cut.
Yeah.
So in terms of community policing, my question again would have to go back to the definition of that, and how it's interpreted by the people who it's being given to. Because it's going to be hard. It's going to be harder. Now, Mr. Ford is a reverend sitting on the panel today, but there's some people that he probably, and I probably grew up with, and some of my fraternity brothers who the prevailing thought in their mind is the gun being pulled on them at 9 years old. How do we get to those people? Chaplain.
How do we get to the people? I think what we're saying now, if we want to get to the people, those things that happen to like Ryan, doing what we're doing now, having panels, bringing people, faith. When I think about this, Faith&Blue, even being involved with the church. As pastors, we have a voice and our people listen. Well, some of them do. The Bible says faith come by hearing. I'm sorry, this is the preacher coming out. Faith come by hearing. As they hear us talk about the police officers and serving, and we're trying to change. There was a young man at my house the other day from Raleigh, in his community. Someone had just held someone hostage at gunpoint. He gets out of his car, because the guy got away, gets out of his car to go in his house. And at the same time, this report has been given, and they get him, snatch him, because he fits the description. They take him to the young lady, white lady, and she says, it's not him. Now, when he showed me the picture of the guy, he looked just like him. That could have went a whole nother way. I said to him, how did you react and how did you respond? He said, I did what they asked me to do. He said, but afterwards, they were very apologetic. So I do believe change is coming slowly and things are being done. But in order to check, we got to do what we're doing now. As pastors, as leaders, as community leaders, being a voice.
I think you're absolutely right. I want to take a couple of questions from the audience, and we have some questions that our Zoom audience has. And I think Gabrielle, her question was, how do we get to community policing when there is a clear power dynamic? How do we?
So what was one of the things that was presented to the council members is just understanding the empowerment when people start believing or exercising their rights, asking questions and getting educated. That takes on power in itself. It's self-empowering when you start actually even knowing what is the law, what can I or can I not do. You know, educating yourself is powerful. switching that power dynamics, but knowing that we got a long way to go, and every community has a responsibility. Even though what's happening across the nation is going to impact us, every community, the stronger the voices of the masses, the stronger the community will become. I am a police chief. I've been in law enforcement for 32 years. I am scared to death for when my daughters travel.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
That because I know I'm not with them, and life may happen.
How about yourself when you are traveling and you're not in uniform? Like, what is that?
That is me following every rule, moving slowly, understanding. I don't know what that person have been trained, being clear, giving no reason to have abuse be taken upon me or challenged in every aspect.
Chief, I got a direct question for you right here.
All right.
It's coming from Sean. He said, why haven't you fully endorsed the Citizen Police Oversight Authority? What is it? Credential Oversight?
I mean, that's a great follow-up. I'm gonna let Chief answer the question, but that's a great follow-up to Gabrielle's question, which was, how do we actually implement this stuff, or what is the way to do that to kind of really give community policing the power it needs? Exactly what Sean just named, a citizen review board.
Okay. The question
Sean,
was.
I'm gonna answer the question again to Sean because I've answered the question to him over and over again. I will follow whatever laws that exist. They get created.
Yeah.
I will follow whatever laws that exist.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one of the fundamental issues that I think many folks in the public don't fully understand is that there are a lot of efforts in a lot of police departments to make change. Change does not come easily.
Right.
There are barriers. There are obstacles that have to be overcome. North Carolina is not a union state. But there are PABs, there are collective bargaining agreements, there are all kinds of institutional barriers that make it difficult for folks to make change. That power started in the late 60s, early 70s. So the answer is, if there's going to be real change, and I think this is a beginning point, Chief, to start having these conversations where we're talking to each other rather than at each other.
So, Your Honor, and here's the thing, and maybe I'm a little bit optimistic. I don't want to say if.
Okay.
There's going to be real change. So what the thing is, like, what's next? What do we do? Right. We got a question over here. State your name and give us your question, sir. And I'll repeat it so that the people on Zoom can hear it.
Raheem Jones. Number one, I would say that just listening. It's more first part of the comment. I'm speaking for the community. Everybody pretty much know I'm from probably you guys probably don't know probably not familiar.
Yes, sir.
But what I'm noticing is you're talking about community and me. Everybody mind me being totally honest in here. Everybody know me to be honest. Right now you got two institutions that people don't trust talking about the community. We don't trust the church.
That's true.
We don't trust the police.
That's true.
And that's the two people
That's true.
talking here?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
We don't.
Well, let's say a part of the community.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
I got you. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys that I know.
I got you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And it's two organizations that people don't have any trust in. You see your uniform. Me, I know we met. I know you cool as a pastor. Miss Sharon, I know you Mark. But when I go to my neighborhood, you just the police. You just some lady that maybe we see every other month to feed the homeless every now and then. We just see you in your pool pit. We barely see you. So it's like everybody up here we don't trust. We don't know y'all.
Yeah.
I've never seen you, but I'm pretty sure somebody seen you is on the other side of Bam the Gap. So
Let me share something with you. I hear you. I understand you. I went on the bench in 1989. We didn't have any black Superior Court judges, or very few. There was what was called a gubernatorial appointment. African Americans got a 5-year appointment. The term is for 8 years. I went on the bench in '89. Not long after I went on the bench, I was on Rayford Road, coming out of Harris Teeter, about to make a right turn. Y'all heard the term wide turn? Okay, don't do that. All right, that's the reason to stop you. I didn't make a wide turn. I turned into the lane, moved over slowly, had seen a police vehicle further down the road. As I turned, he turned. I stopped at a light to turn left on the Marlboro. I saw the officer pick up what I assume was his car phone. I turned left, he turned left. Shortly after I made that left turn, light comes on. He walks up behind me. I got my driver's license and my registration in my hand. He says, driver's license, registration. I handed it to him. He never looked at it. He said, does that tag mean what I think it means? I had a J tag on my car, judicial tag. And I said, officer, I know you know what the tag is because I saw you call it in. And I didn't do anything illegal. So the only thing that comes to mind is you stopped me because I don't fit the tag. And I asked him how long he had been on the force. He had just come out of training. I said, I ordinarily don't do this, but I want to see you and your former training officer in my office on Monday morning. They came in and I said, I am not here to hassle you. I am not here to report you to anybody. What I want you to know is what you did is may not cause you harm, but it may hurt the officer coming behind you. It may put that officer at risk. Coincidentally, it was not a white officer. It was a Hispanic officer, and I could tell from his accent that he was from New York City. And I said, are you from the Bronx or Brooklyn? And I can't remember whether he said Bronx or Brooklyn. I said, how many times growing up in the Bronx or Brooklyn, wherever it was you came from, will you stop just walking down the street? And he hung his head. The point that I'm making is that it's not always a white color thing. There are occasions, because all of us are human beings, all of us have biases, all of us have that natural human tendency to want to put people, places, and things into boxes. It doesn't just apply to race, it applies to gender as well. Y'all in the church know that. So the point is to start seeing each other as human beings, treating each other as human beings. And the way that starts is by beginning these conversations. It's not going to happen overnight. I hear you. I understand you. I have family members that have been lost in the streets. I have family members that have done time. So your experience is not something that I'm unfamiliar with. But we have to start someplace. And thank you, Chief, for at least beginning us in terms of getting that conversation underway. Yeah. Now, let me say one last thing, and I'm going to shut up. I don't want to walk away with folks saying, well, we're after the officers, or more specifically, we're after the white officers. I presided over cases where officers, regardless of color, regardless of what community they were working in, have risked their lives running into a burning place to save a child. So I know there is that common humanity within us. We have to just begin to accept it, acknowledge it, and recognize that we are one people. We are one, folks. This thing about black race, white race, all of that stuff, none of that is scientifically, genetically true. That stuff was created. It's a social construct that was created by folks who wanted to create strategies or stratifications in our society to maintain control.
Yeah, did you ask your question? Did you ever ask your question?
Yeah, I'm with.
Yeah.
How do you begin to fix that besides,
I can tell you how I did it.
But how do you begin to tell, not me, because I'm here.
Yeah.
But when you go down here to Shaw Road, Bonnie Dunes, Floyd Heights, Massey Hill, or even down here in Campbell Terrace, how do you tell them, how do you begin to build that trust with those kids, those adults?
And it's definitely the way not to do that is to send more and more and more police down there. That's for sure.
And I think in terms of what I was getting at earlier on, it's having the definition that we all understand so that we can participate in it. I think that's probably, in my opinion, I don't think that we know what we're trying to do across the board.
Yeah.
I think that I think it was Gabrielle who talked about the power construct and it being different. How do we speak to that?
So the original question is, what is your perception of what you think it should be? back to you, right? Our ultimate goal should be feeling safe, right?
Yep.
Without us, without the uniform, not without us. Let me change that. Not without us, because we're part of the community. Without the enforcement of taking to jail. How do we do that? And that can only come from you. That can only come from the community and where you live. It can only come from Shaw Road to stop the violence, right? Because we have of course, we have the extremes that we're dealing with, the issues of Breonna Taylor, the violence. But I have the everyday, and when I tell you we have the everyday, you know, the heartbreak of violence in the community, the heartbreak of children dying, the heartbreak of adults dying, self-inflicted from each other in the community. Not to go in to do our job, to go enforcement, do the investigation and bring it to court.
Right.
We don't even want to do that.
That's
we
right.
want to say, how can we come to the table to talk, to
Right.
say, what is it? Ideally, how can we get this? And one part of the definition, I remember Dr. Freeman was talking about, how can we get the free movement and commerce in our community?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. The free movement, comfortable, and commerce of feeling comfortable.
And Chief, I think you're absolutely right when you say that, you know, the policing and taking people in handcuffs and putting them in jail and putting them in front of a judge is not the solution to the point that Mr. Jones had made. So the way community policing in other communities that have already implemented a lot of these practices, what it resulted in is just more police going to these neighborhoods. And I don't think that's where we need to be spending our tax money and our energy and our resources towards just sending more police. What happens if we didn't send police to that neighborhood? We sent folks that could help folks get jobs, figure out why they weren't able to finish, you know, whatever schooling they were trying to do, or to get into, you know, a second career, whatever that needs to be. Why isn't that where we're investing? And so, well, and the reason I ask, and so maybe this will be a question back to Chief, is how will Fayetteville in particular implement community policing? Because again, in other areas, community policing turned into, we want you to get to know your neighborhood, we want you to go around, but it ended up sort of just being more cops policing these areas. And you know, why do they have so many calls coming out of there? Why do they have so many issues? It's because they've been abandoned otherwise.
Cause I don't want us to just kind of skip over, because he made some very valid points, and I just want to encourage you, not as a pastor, as a friend, because you all to a certain degree have a reason not to in totality trust police and churches. But I would encourage you, as we do have the responsibility to be a better example of pastors and of law enforcement. You all have the responsibility of not look past the position and look at an individual's heart. You know, I think a lot of what it was taking place in America are heart issues. If a person doesn't like another individual because of the color of their skin, that's a heart issue. And so I would encourage you to don't look at the position, don't look at the uniforms, look at their heart. For example, me and police chief had a conversation a few months back where a certain judge in Cumberland County had, I was 17 years old on probation, looking at spending some time, and he had every right to send me off to prison, but he didn't. He gave me another opportunity. And I believe at that moment, his heart was at a great place to give me that opportunity. Now, at my first set of felonies, and just being transparent, came from Judge Weeks, who was actually on the panel on me today. Yep. Now, not to say he's a bad individual, but I don't think he had a good heart at that particular time. So I think wholeheartedly, you got to look past a person's position and give them an opportunity and judge them by their heart. The Bible says that men look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. So don't judge a person because of their position, automatically allow that, whatever stigma is carried around, look at that person's heart. And I think we can better make
Well, to your point, Ryan,
yeah.
I think that they could say the same thing. I think that.
Great point, Mr. Moderator.
Right.
What a great point.
Right. I think that they could say the same thing because, I mean, God looks at the heart of every man, not just them.
Right.
They look at the heart of everybody on that side too.
Right.
So I think, to your point, he has one, right?
But he definitely has a valid point.
Right.
You know.
But in this, when we're talking about the heart issues, and I think that that's one of the things from their side. We hear that. We hear that it's a hard issue. We've known that. I grew up in the apostolicity of the Pentecostal church, right? So I am very well versed in this.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
Right. So, so with that understanding of it, I can see why and how, because the church, and we said this at our talk, the church is responsible for racism. 1455.
Yeah.
The Roman Catholic Church is who actually gave Portugal the right to go to the southern coast of Africa and enslave them. That was the church's doing. So we're here now today because of the church into some large decree. So I get it on both sides. You got that? So for us now, again, my question is, what do we do? Because there's some systemic issues that when we talk about heart, that are developed, that are not learned, that are not innate. What do we do to actually address those issues so that we can get to community policing? Because in my estimation, when you say community policing, you're talking about Black community policing. You don't have these police all in white folk.
Nope, they're not going to those neighborhoods.
Communities and neighborhoods.
No, they're not.
That's true.
So what's community policing? How does that look like for us?
So let me add, because he did just say,
Yes,
Mario just said a point, and you don't know, you realize you said it because I think you were gearing towards what is the city, Fayetteville, and I think you meant police department.
Well, but fair. I get you're going. Yeah.
You meant police department.
Sure.
But what you said was accurate.
Sure.
What is the city of Fayetteville?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you said
This is just one department among many in the city.
No, back it on up.
Okay.
It's not the police department. It is the city of Fayetteville.
That's right. Because you guys are just one department. There's other ones that also need to do their part. No, I'm missing it. Give me again.
You're missing it.
I'm missing it.
You said implement the city.
Yes.
Every department.
Because you said put the education in there. Talk about other resources that
other city departments. That's right.
That community leads, and that's exactly.
She's not saying department.
Well, I'm saying it needs to. No, I'm saying it needs to be because I think
economic development department.
There we go.
Yeah, he's
social services.
Social services.
Yes.
You said that, and that's what was presented to the council members. It means not just the community members or community neighborhoods. It said the health department, the education. It said bring those to the table to deal with the issue so it doesn't result in us having to come out and doing it. You said, and that was it. That was part of the presentation, which is community, not just the department.
Right.
Come, we want to do what we're doing this evening, right? We have a movie night coming up this evening. That's a highlight of our job, right? Who doesn't want to come out and engage with children, youth at a movie night? But what you said was exactly how the concept is: bring in social services, bring in education to find out why there's an economic divide.
That's right.
Why is there an educational divide?
Right.
Why is this school not able to have the same results as this school?
Right.
That's
we know some of those answers. I'm gonna go to David real quick. He has a question, and then we'll come back right up there. David.
I actually don't have a question. I have a whole lot of comments, but I'm not on the panel, so I'm going to try to keep it relatively brief.
Well, I'll help you.
There's an old expression that asks, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
It sounds like we're trying to eat the whole elephant.
Yes.
The issue is not all of the departments. The issue is community police and the community. Yes, we have all these other things going on as well, but the issue is supposed to be community policing. So if we're going to talk about community policing, we should keep it limited, at least initially, to those particular aspects of things. Now, I wasn't intending to say that, but I said that first. But my background is in the military. I represent the Islamic Center of Fayetteville, but I did 24 years in the Air Force, and I chose this seat specifically for a reason. When I came in, I sit right here because that's what my background does for me. My military background, criminal justice is what I did in the military. But people say, why don't you sit up front? Because for me, this is my situational awareness. I watch what's going on in the room. That's what my background is. It was said the blacks on this side of the room and the whites on that side of the room. That's a perspective issue. I saw the police on that side of the room and the citizens on this side of the room. I didn't see black and white. Then I had to ask myself, why were the police sitting there? So I give them the benefit of the doubt. The first thing we have to do as human beings is start to give each other the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. I said their training teaches them to be aware, to be near that door, to be protected, to do things that make them out front. If they need to make a quick exit, they can make an exit out the door. So I don't see that as a problem. I don't see it as a problem of them being white on that side. There's no black officers on that side as well. I don't see that as a problem. I don't see that as a negative. I see that as them doing what their training teaches them to do. So we have to work on our perspectives.
Yes.
We have to work on our perspectives as police officers. We have to work on our perspectives as citizens, and we have to work on our perspectives as human beings. And one of the, sitting down, like I said, I'm not on the panel, so I don't get to talk as long as you should be able to talk. But one of the first things I would do, with all due respect to the chief, is I would throw that definition out that you read. It's too big. It's too complex. I stopped listening to the definition before you got halfway. And if it starts to cause people to turn off, it's of no value. It's not a good definition. It should be simple, straight to the point. Now I wrote down a quick definition while I was sitting here.
I was hoping that you did that because I want to hear it.
It's probably going to be wrong. It's probably not going to cover everything that everybody wants. But I think when we start talking to people, we should talk in language and in concepts that everybody can start working with. And you can't do that if I stop listening to you. So the definition I wrote down for community policing is a developed and developing interpersonal relationship between the local police and community members. How can we develop our relationship with each other? That to me is very simple, and you can start working with that. We need to work with that. Now, all the other subcategories of whether you come out and do movie night, or whether you put more police in the community, or all those kinds of things can be addressed somewhere else down the road. The basic idea is we need a better relationship with each other. Police and community need a better relationship. Whose fault is it? I don't care. Whose fault it is. We need a better relationship.
So let me share with that.
I think the fault is very important. I'm sorry, Chief.
Say it again. The what?
Yeah, we got to point out what the problem is. We don't not necessarily address fault or give fault to someone as if they can't. We want it to be improved, but we got to at least name the problem. We also never solve it.
Hold on. I know everybody wants to say something to what he just said. First of all, thank you so much, Chief.
So to the elephant, right? The biggest problem is we think we're addressing the symptom that's out there, which brings us to the table. How do we eliminate us coming to the table to deal with a symptom, which is crime? We have to drill down, which is the causes, the underground, the education, the economic. That is not, the police are not out there shooting, robbing. We're being called to the scene. The backup is we are training on the relationships. We're training on the conversation, but we also are getting called. We're not calling ourselves to investigate crime, to respond to drive-by shooting, to respond by incidents that cause fear, the quality of life. All those are the symptom is call the police. Right. The response is call the police to fix it.
Yeah, you're right.
And it should be the community saying, no, I don't want you to call the police to fix it. I want to have input on why is my child not getting educated?
Yeah.
Why is my child not getting health care?
Absolutely.
Why don't I have options for to live in a house that other people don't have options of? As a human and as a resident citizen, that's my ultimate. Because when I take this uniform off, that's what
and it's funny that everything that Chief just mentioned, that argument that she made is literally what the people who hashtag defund the police say all the time. Instead of having all of this money being overly invested in more and more police and aerodynamic beating sticks, instead, why don't we, at the end of the yearly budget, put more money into the social working folks, the folks that are going to work on the health stuff, the folks that are going to work on schooling, supplies. What happens if we rethought the way that we improve safety in a community? You don't have the safest community because you spent $1 billion on your police department. You have a safe community because you spent $100 million here and $100 million there to prevent the crime from ever happening. So that that's another phrase we hear, community policing. I know that's what we're here to talk about, but that's another misunderstood or without a real definition. People think it means send a cop out there with one shoe on, without shoelaces, hobbling around. That's not what that means. It means exactly what Chief Hawkins just said.
And I agree. And we can come back to that. I know that the judge had something directly to say right here. Then we'll come back to the defund idea.
No, I appreciate the comments, but Chief has already spoken to it. You can't look at this in isolation. It has to be looked at in the broader context. They don't write the laws; they enforce it. So when you're talking about positive change, you have to look across the broad spectrum. In the late 60s, early 70s, the prison population in America was about 400,000 people. It blew up. And it blew up in large part because of the civil rights movement. It went from 400,000 to 1.3 million. The United States of America has about 4 or 5% of the world's population. We lock up about 25% of the world's prisoners. 2/3 of them are people of color, for the most part. Those are the results of things that they have no control over. They enforce it. And I think that's a part of the conversation, how it's being enforced.
Right. I think that's
right.
But the issue is the whole spectrum: healthcare, education, housing, everything.
Absolutely.
It's all interwoven.
Absolutely.
And it has to be addressed in that context. And Pastor, I apologize. I don't remember your case.
No, he's fine.
Yeah, let's not get that bombshell.
Judge, say behind
I turned out. I turned out all right.
No,
I turned out all right.
I
turned out all right.
We can talk after.
Okay. But to that point, the judge that did give me the second chance was a white judge, and so I was just making a point that we got to look past the color, because you obviously of a man of minority gave me my first conviction, and I turned out all right. To God be the glory. But I was just making a point.
All right because of what I did.
We can talk later. We can talk later.
Hey, y'all have your own conversation later on. I think
Real talk.
Yeah, I think that first of all, Dave, I appreciate that. That was a really good thing. But I think that Mario made a point that we want to kind of like pivot and go to now, because Chief, I think everything that I've heard, I think we have politicized certain things.
Yeah.
And defunding police has been
Bad language.
right, bad language, but it has been something that we have used in this particular political cycle more often than needed, in my opinion. So when you hear that, Chief, and then we'll go, because what you said, because I understand the definition of defund is what I heard from Mario and what I heard you say. But when you hear defund the police and we talk about community policing, do you tie those two hand in hand?
I understand all the extremes of defunding, from the one to say totally abolish law enforcement, and we can self-govern ourselves. But I also understand the thought, if there are certain people that believe there were any funds that went to law enforcement entities, period, that came away from social services or education, and then they just gave it to the police. No, what happened was police had to figure out how to retrain because these services were not being provided.
Yeah,
so the effort of, should there be effort going to these services?
Yeah.
Not just effort or not just money. There should be capacity and acceptance of saying, what is the step to address it, and what is the issue, and where is it resolved? You can't just say, yes, create a healthcare system that we know is going to address this issue. No, first you have to identify what is the problem because all communities are different. What is the problem in this community? From listening to the residents of that community, voice their concerns, evaluating the data, and saying, well, let's see if this might help as a resource or service. Until that time, of course, ultimately our goal is, do we eventually get to the point where we don't need law enforcement.
Right.
Of course, that would be absolutely
Utopia,
amazing.
sure. And so when we talk about, addressing the needs of the community in the ways that Chief Hawkins just mentioned, it's always encouraging to hear Chief Hawkins speak, because I do feel like she does get it. And, I think, me being invited to this panel is certainly is a testament to that, because of, some of the criticisms that I do have, but a lot of them are warranted, because when we talk about how is it that the police got this much funding and that department didn't, well, it's because who comes to the meetings? Who comes to all of these occasions? If we're going to be frank here, I feel like everyone else got to say black and white. When a bunch of old white folks come around, they don't want to invest into the minority communities. They want to see more police go police them. They don't want to see economic development in those communities. They want to see folks just getting put behind bars. And I'm not saying that contemporarily. Judge Weeks talked about it for a while, and we can all admit that that was absolutely the reality for centuries in this country. You weren't investing in people who didn't look like you. So that's why we're at where we are today. And so if we need to reinvest by addressing that fact that we gave all of these millions for decades and decades to this one department that will make sure that minority communities don't get ahead, get put away. And then now we need to address that by taking money away from that area and putting it somewhere else. That's what we mean by defund the police.
Because here's the thing, money has to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but is that the priority? Is our priority actually building this community up, or is our priority making sure that they stay down?
Yes, sir.
I'm Dr. Greg Perkins. I come from all the schools in the house, academia, social work professor, work support system, not the Judge Weeks, but other judges, and of course, on the religious side, and working in the community. So, one of the things that I think sometimes get mucked in the clay is the fact that we don't understand the true concept of policy and politics.
Sure.
Policy and politics. And so when we make that service call to law enforcement because our child ran away, is that a policy issue? Is that a political issue? Or is that a family issue? It's definitely not a law enforcement issue.
Right.
But we call it. When we have a family member who is seriously mentally ill, and we call law enforcement, is that a policy issue? Certainly it is. Is it a law enforcement issue? No. It isn't.
Right.
And so when we have this these true problems with social injustice and policing, we lump it all together, and we want resources that are sent and meant for salaries of our, and that's all it is, salary. We want those salaries taken away, which means we want fewer police officers. That's what we're really saying. And we want that money sent to the Department of Social Services. So what I say is understanding policy and politics. The city, collectively, this city of Fayetteville, and I participated in that process on more than one occasion, has community forums where citizens come and they prioritize where they want the resources to go. Do they want the resources, social services? Then that's referred to the county, because the county manages social services and healthcare, not the police department. See what I'm saying? So we get policy and politics confused, but we want police to do all the policing.
Right, right.
I agree with you. Were you about to say something?
Yeah, go ahead though.
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say, going back, because we were talking about commission. Now, I'm totally aware, and I hope everyone is, that there are always going to be a sector of people who just don't like the police. There's just going to be that sector. But I want to ask Police Chief Hawkins, as it relates to community policing and building that relationship with the urban communities, the African-American communities, how important, because stigma and how they see their perspective of officers is that what really causes that withdrawal, that drawback for them. How important is that or should police break that stigma, and how does that look like? How important is it that they break the stigma, what that looks like?
Let me make sure I understand your question.
Okay.
Did you say the stigma of how the community sees law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it important to break that stigma?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
And how do we do that?
The only thing, based off of my experience, it has to be one relationship at a time. Yeah. It's not a big brush. It has to be every encounter, every opportunity, from the police department, but also the community. Challenge how were you treated? And if you weren't treated like you feel like it was respectful, let's address it and make a complaint, or let's talk to someone or have that conversation. really, period. Even internally, you know, we are all human. Even internally, we have our own issues with talking to each other. I'm talking about the police department. They my family. I can talk about them.
Right.
But some people may have a perception of how they see themselves or see a rank or even another employee. Creating an opportunity to learn how to talk to people is a learned skill. Would you agree? Learning, it's a learned skill that's challenged with technology right now. So it does require training, understanding, empathy.
Right.
It involves a lot of different things, but how important it is absolutely important.
I'd like to challenge that same question to Mario.
Yeah.
How important is it that?
Well, and I would give an example because, you know, I think one of the reasons I have this great opportunity beyond just, you know, Chief Hawkins, you know, recognizing the importance of having, you know, a multitude of voices and perspectives is that I am currently enrolled in the Citizens Police Academy, which is a 10-week program, a couple hours every week over the next 10 weeks. You know, I'm understanding more and more about Fayetteville Police Department. You know, you can read a report on police nationwide. That's not necessarily going to apply to what the unique situations we have here. And so very recently we had a police or the orientation or the seminar, I should say, was on diversity and recruitment. You know, it was front and center. They weren't afraid to say it. It was there. It was really good to see. My question to the person was, you know, I don't say I set them up, but my question was,
You set them up.
they said that they're prioritizing because they know that their police department, that Fayetteville Police Department, doesn't look exactly the way the community looks. And ideally, demographically, it'll look similar to the way communities, because Fayetteville's 40-40, black and white, and then therefore majority minority because, you know, Latinos and Asian folks are here too. But I asked him, you guys said that that's important to you. Tell me why it's important. And the response was not great. The response was, well, the Justice Department said to, so we're doing it. And then the other sentence that was given was, sometimes people deal better with, you know, certain people, which is to say, the way I received that was, you know, maybe if it's a black officer, they'll you know, listen to them. And I don't think that that's why diversity is important. I think it's deeper than that. I think step one is you got to say the reason diversity is important is because of implicit racial bias.
Right.
Plain and simple. That's something that I think community policing is supposed to fix, which is, like I mentioned earlier, you're policing and there is you're a white officer and there's a young white man doing something that, you know, marginally you could probably let him go. Yeah, it's disturbing the peace, but, you know, he kind of reminds me of myself that age, breaking those bottles over there, you know, whatever it was. And the difference is when he sees another young man who might have been riding his bike and there was a stolen bike supposedly reported, he doesn't give Ryan Ford the benefit of the doubt. He goes straight to thinking that that's got to be the stolen bike. Wow. So, you know, the implicit racial bias, you know, that's my point. You don't give them that benefit of the doubt that you would have otherwise, you know, but that requires, you know, the department to say it plainly. Don't say that it's not a thing, just say it and have your officers be able to articulate it when they're asked and not be afraid to admit that it's true, that we have a systemically racist justice system, period, with who gets, you know, the book thrown at them when you got a couple of, and then versus someone who gets, well, you know, he's a good student, he's a good, you know, he's an athlete, let's let him go. You know, there's a difference in who gets that kind of benefit of the doubt and who doesn't, and that's why you need a diverse judge, bar. You need a diverse police department, and but say that's why it is. Don't say it's because the Justice Department said to.
So, Judge, Chief, when he says that, do you agree with that statement?
Why you need a diverse police department?
Yeah.
Why it's important.
Why I feel is important is because the different we are, the better we are. That's why I feel it's important. And different means we're not perfect. Learning and understanding is important because as we recruit residents of our city to come on the police department, we acknowledge everybody is different, from not just the difference of gender, race, how you were raised, socioeconomic. You're going to come with all type of biases, period. Knowing what your individual ones are are important because they can go different ways. Sure. But it's definitely important because it makes us stronger, and honesty makes us stronger. It also makes us have the ability to learn, because we have what's called the Hate U Give seminars we do with human relations, right? And we send all different parts of the police department because we want honesty. I'm not going to tell them what to say. Either they're going to learn it, or I'm going to keep training them. I'm like, okay, let me go have this opportunity to train and make sure they know. One of the fear was, okay, we might send new recruits on there. We don't know how are they going to get attacked? You know what? If they do, they need to work through this. They need to work through their responses, and they need to work and feel that. How do you feel? Let's bring it out. This is our safe space to say how we feel. And if we feel in a certain kind of way, let's be honest with each other and hear each other, hear what you say.
And get to a better place.
And and like, oh, okay. They don't know. They don't know.
I'm glad you said that, because online, I think it was Gabrielle that said something about, she said, how do we expect the community to feel that they are being heard in these kind of conversations when it's only you? But there are others here, and you send, and I guess it's just because you're doing the speaking right here today. There are others that are participating in this conversation?
Oh, talking about
other officers. They said,
you can't see them in the room. There's most of my command staff, but remember, they're everywhere. I don't come to the Citizens Police Academy and teach them how to. They get it wrong.
So we're just speaking to the Zoom group because they don't see that.
Yeah, they get it. Yeah. So the entire, not just officers, my entire police department is over 600 people. I count my sworn and non-sworn, because even how someone picks the phone up and how they treat someone has biases that can come in play, right? How you respond and come from the clerk, from internally and externally, plays a role on how if we can't treat ourselves right on the inside, there's no way it's going to happen on the outside.
So with that though, and I know that there are biases, but
yes,
do you believe Judge, both of you who are a part of law enforcement and the judicial system, do you believe that there are systemic racial biases in the institutions?
Absolutely. I mentioned already, I was one of the first elected. We had to run statewide back then.
Okay.
I was one of the first eight of us went on the bench at the same time. And you can see the separation, even in our meetings. Our group, smaller number, the larger group. But over the years, there was the relationships developed. So diversity is absolutely important.
So I don't want to I think that Perkins had like a wonderful statement that I guess for all of us, we have to understand in terms of policy, politics, and what the police actually have the ability to do or not do. So Mario, how, or Chaplain, or Ryan, either one of you, how important, or what is it that we have to do to actually change the way our communities are policed based on our policies?
Right. And I think that's a great question because, everyone is familiar with this other buzzword, the war on drugs, right? We've all heard about the failed war on drugs. Now, so much of our policy, the laws that our police are having to enforce, are based on things that are legal one state over. So all of a sudden, you're ruining someone's life over, a small amount of marijuana, and that's it for them in so many ways in our society. You got to check that box. You're not getting that job. What are you going to start doing? The wrong thing after that point. That's policy. And that's not really the police's original fault, if you will, that they had to enforce an otherwise racially biased piece of legislation, right? Because there was a time, I know it's been it's been changed since then, but there was a time that, crack was, gave a harsher sentence than cocaine. If you had, and there's plenty of people that talk all the time that the police were policing these white communities just as much. White kids are doing drugs too, but where were they going? They were going to this neighborhood, rounding everyone up. And, it's just interesting that we still prioritize a lot of these ticky-tacky sort of crimes that aren't violent, that aren't actually, things that are going to destroy our communities. And so we've got to rethink and start to reform the way we treat, you know, what we actually are going to fix our community. And it's not necessarily busting everybody for smoking a joint.
Chief, what's the ticky-tacky crime?
Woo-wee.
I mean, in a sense, like, I know, what's it?
There are plenty, in my opinion, crimes that make demands from the police department to come and respond to. In our city, there are. They exist. And we have to do our job and respond. Pull out your ordinances. Pull out your state laws.
Yes.
They exist.
But at the same time, the white collar crimes that are taking millions and millions out of people's, you know, pension funds or their retirement, you know, all these other ways that, you know, crimes you can get out of real easy. You know, you can get out, you don't get no time. You might have some probation at worst, but then you go and you have a felony record for something that, you know,
well, Mario, and to your point, I'm with you 100% on that. But, and the police, that's not their responsibility though.
It isn't necessarily. And that's where I think about, you know, I think about former police chief, I forget your predecessor, Chief Hawkins.
That's good enough. My predecessor.
Very good. Very good. Very good. You know, I think it's important. I think it's important. I'll let it go. I think it's important when, you know, we do the, I won't say dramatic because I don't know if there's another word for it, but when we had the driving while black situation in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the policy change, you know, the general orders to the police changed. You're no longer, when you pull someone over, going to just ask them to search their car. You're going to pull out a piece of paper and you're going to say, do you consent to this search on paper? Now, but whereas previously I'm intimidated and I think this cop's going to let me go if I just play along and I let him in, but then he puts the piece of paper in front of me. And we all know, don't sign nothing until you read it, right? Everyone's got an immediate aversion when they all of a sudden had to put their hands down. And all of a sudden you saw these rates of unwarranted searches on certain people go down. It was no longer this big disparity in who was being searched and who wasn't. That was an immediate change that came from an immediate change in policy. So we didn't have, you know, 40% of our population being pulled over and searched 70% of the time, whereas white folks were, again, 40%, but they're only being searched 25, 35% of the time. So that's an example of what the police can do immediately. I think if I were to throw another example or another suggestion out there is don't tear gas people if they're peacefully protesting. That happened here in Fayetteville. That happened after anyone doing anything wrong was long gone. That was when moms and their daughters were out there getting tear gas when there was just a dozen people left out here on Gillespie Street. Don't do that. You know, there's so many different policies that you can change like that you don't have to pretend like, well, it's out of my hands. City council got to tell me. City council got to advise me. And I'm not saying that's you, Chief Hawkins. I mean, this is a problem across the board because it gets back to the policy versus the politics type stuff. Because politically, there's still absolutely old Fayetteville who don't want to see a lot of the changes that a lot of people want and are calling for in 2020. And so all of a sudden, a city council, those big checks that be coming in from the property owners, they're not going to be coming anymore because you just changed the policy that's not going to have that neighborhood stay nice and cheap where I can continue to flip houses and bleed the city dry. You know, all of a sudden, you're having to invest money elsewhere.
Yeah, and I get you. And I don't want to just cut you off, but you're preaching and we're not in church. But no, I'm just saying.
You're supposed to be preaching.
Right. No, I get where you are, right? And that's a cool thing. We're good, but that's not exactly where we are in terms of community policing. I got a text earlier that I missed, and one of my friends in law enforcement said that community policing is about legitimacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Can I, since my friend is here, Chief, can I ask them to expound?
He in the audience.
But, see, I didn't even call him.
We all know who you were talking about.
So Chief Nolet, one of the assistant chiefs that gets to work with Chief Hawkins within the department, and been here for 22 years to see different chiefs come and go. And at the end of the day, everything we talk about is legitimacy.
Yes.
Ryan talking about how he was treated at 14 is about legitimacy. Mario and what he's been preaching preaching. It's about legitimacy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
King, who I've stood at the market house with him and Mario and been at events with them, is about legitimacy. Chief Hawkins and everything she's talking about in policing is legitimacy. Judge Weeks and my dear friend and the chaplain, it's all about legitimacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you feel that the police are legitimate
Yes.
in your community, you're going to talk to them.
Yeah.
Because you feel that you're being heard.
Yes.
You're going to help them solve crimes, which then helps present a better city. So at the end of the day, community policing is simply legitimacy.
Yes.
Legitimacy through the community, legitimacy through policing. Mario talked about all these different things that we can bring to a community. That's called community. We're only one portion of that,
Exactly.
which is community policing.
Exactly.
And all I can do is bring forward. And the
Absolutely.
comment that drives me crazy is we're called law enforcement. No, we're a policing agency.
Yes.
Law enforcement is one component of what we do.
Absolutely. And I love, Chief, I like that. You did good.
Yeah.
Y'all give him a hand real quick. No, but David, how do you feel about that?
He stopped listening to you about the second set.
No,
No, really. And that's why, no, wait.
I'm messing with you now.
I feel good about that.
Right. Listen, that's why I went to David because I wanted to see, because of that statement.
Yeah, it's good.
I
Yeah.
want-
I wasn't sure I was going to let that out.
give it.
So I was willing to just sit quietly, but I understand what you mean about the holistic approach.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with the fact that everything has to be considered. My point was that at some point you have to deal with the primary issue.
Yeah.
first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which
Yes, all of those other things have to be dealt with. And but Jay,
Sister Chief, know what?
what he said about legitimacy, that's part of the relationship.
Yeah.
right.
That's what I'm saying, that the relationship between police and community needs to be strong first.
Yep.
We need to deal with all of our biases.
Yep.
All of our preconceived ideas about who each other are.
Right.
And then once we deal with
Yeah,
those
process,
ideas,
yeah.
those preconceived ideas, and we become legitimate.
That makes it legitimate.
citizens,
Right.
Then I don't become the usual suspect.
Right.
When you come to my community, you don't see me as one who fits the description.
Right.
But that's,
You see me as a citizen.
Yep.
in this,
I can't
in this
stand
community.
A free citizen, absolutely.
As a citizen in this community, you think that I deserve to be treated legitimately.
100%.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yes.
As a police officer, I think you need to be treated legitimately.
Great point.
And then we work together.
so when I saw the text, that's why I was like, because legitimacy actually speaks to, that's something that we can all understand, right? We need to have legitimate relationship. The question then is, like you said, Dave, it's a holistic approach, but how do we make these relationships now legitimate? How do we get here? Because right now we're in an illegitimate relationship.
And I think that's where it is on the police to do more than just ask the people to do their part. It's not simply, don't ask what the police can do for you, ask what you can do for the police. You know what I mean? I don't accept that, because I think to establish that legitimacy at a certain point, if there's a vicious cycle of distrust and mistrust of the police, somebody's got to do something different. Right. Somebody's got to break that. And I think in this case, especially with what we see happening to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and what could happen anywhere in America when somebody is, got a gun and a chip on their shoulder, it could happen here. So I think it is up to the police to continue to do things like this. Chief Hawkins, I think, has done so much, important work, but there's more to be done that will actually save someone's life when they're pulled over and they're not having a good day and maybe they're a little disrespectful, and that doesn't mean that they need to then get knocked upside the head. Yeah. So what are we doing about our general orders? What are we changing our police policies that was there last month or before the summer? Something has got to change on paper. I don't just want to talk about it. I want to see it.
Can I just say something? I want to go back to King. You said earlier, you said, you have two people up here that our communities don't trust. What are communities you come from? And that's the church, and that is the police officers. Okay, you started talking about legitimacy. So how do you, because you know me, you said several people up here, I know. How do you do your part in the community? Because I've been in your home. How do you, in that community, bring legit, y'all would probably say, make it legit, or say she's legit. How do you do your part So we are able to build relationships. What do you do to help? Or you understand what I'm saying, or what I'm asking?
For the most part, it's about building trust amongst my community. Because they may see me with you, like, okay, she good. But then they may see, once we meet from each other's presence, you may go do something totally off the wall. It's like, yo, that's your people? And then that tears down. They may see me and Chief Hawkins down in my market.
Sure.
And then, without her knowing, when her officers may do something, and now it's like, oh, but that's your people. So that killed all legitimacy.
Now you talking about your legitimacy in your context, in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Of her.
Okay.
Of something.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. Here's the thing, Chief, Officer. So you all have built really good relationships. You know? Hey, I'm sorry. I got to keep my mic, all right? For the next one of these, Pastor Jones, can we use a lapel? I need something. I need something.
We're a work in progress.
Right. No, just playing.
That just means we'll do it again. That's good.
Right. So, to his point, while you may build wonderful relationships here, when we see, it doesn't have to be your officer. It could be the officer
On the news, yeah.
in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
or the officer in Wisconsin,
Right.
who has his knee on somebody's neck.
Yeah.
That actually severs where there was a legitimate relationship brewing
Yeah.
Right.
with you and the community here.
Right.
Now, because of this moment, the relationship is severed because this is what the community sees based on the historical, I need a word, y'all.
Underpinnings.
Underlying underpinnings.
Y'all not good. Based on the historical
Precedent,
realities
yeah.
that we've had in this country that you've explained at the beginning, now we have to start all over.
Yeah.
So what do we do now? Because here's the thing. We are always told that there are all cops aren't bad. There's a bad apple, and all cops are not bad cops. That's what we get, right? How many of you have heard that before? Okay. So why does it feel that all black people, when they're being approached by a cop, is bad?
Oh, yeah.
So if I am to feel that all cops aren't bad, all cops should probably feel that I'm not bad too, right?
So that is your assumption, one. But let me all stops are a danger. All encounters, depending on the assessment. I want to give it back to a little bit of what
All stops are a danger?
they're unsafe. You realize that, right? That there's no routine that officer can guarantee if they make a traffic stop, they're going to be good. They are trained to make sure they are vigilant and safe for all parts. But they're stopping somebody. They have no idea who that person is.
True.
So that's
that
bring,
part. Right.
I want to also kind of go back to Pastor Ford's question of how important is that relationship of building it, right?
I think. Go ahead.
How important is that? We are human. I am not perfect. I don't claim to be. I make mistakes. I'm flawed as they come. Trust me, my command staff knows. But they know me in my kind of raw. They know me when I'm upset. They know when I'm frustrated. They know when I get mad at them, when I sometimes have to concede, I apologize. They know that. Even I'm the chief, it's important for me to make that relationship with them because I need to trust them and they need to trust me ultimately. But it's not going to be perfect. They're close. The same way with my children and my family. The word relationship means you're not perfect, but you work at building something of trust. You work at my word. You work at, I might mess up. Did I hurt your feelings? Have you hurt my feelings sometimes? But do we have that opportunity to say, I'm sorry,
Right.
you know, and keep it going? Or do we say the relationship is conditional.
Right.
That's good.
And the ownership of us to say, we might mess up, y'all, but our commitment is to try to make it right. Can see when we're wrong, how can we get better so we prevent that in the future? Ultimately, it's relationships.
I don't know if we always can see when you're wrong, though. Because when we're looking at,
I'm get you. Yeah,
because
I
in
agree.
terms of the relationship being
We're human.
legitimized, if we look at Breonna Taylor, that's not a concession.
Right.
No.
That's a
okay.
that's a lockdown. And I understand what you're saying.
Because my command gonna say she don't always concede when she's wrong. So I get it. We're in this constant struggle then, right?
And Chief made a good point about that conditional relationship sometimes, right? Because one thing in the several times that Chief and Hawkins and I have gotten a chance to have conversations like this and on different occasions, I always usually start the conversation by saying, Chief, I know you get it from not just me, but if you do anything that is going to be similar to what I'm asking for, there's a other half of folks that are not going to be happy with it. So Chief is getting it from both sides. The Fayetteville Police are getting it from both sides. And the example that I'll give that isn't generic, but it's very specific to Fayetteville, North Carolina, is when there was a social media incident between myself and the Fayetteville Police Department Facebook. I had made a comment, and the people who responded using the Fayetteville Police Department address met me at my level. And they ended up having to issue an apology.
So what level was that?
Oh yeah, I said something rude.
Caddy.
Okay.
I said something rude.
Caddy.
And so they replied for some rudeness. Which, you know, it is what it is. I don't mind. But the apology came in a separate tweet afterwards, or a separate Facebook status afterwards. And if you would have saw all the comments underneath, they weren't back in the blue. They looked at that as some sort of showing of weakness. But really, when you are able to apologize and address, like you said, the working relationship, that's strength. So it was incredibly interesting to me how much hate was in there. The same people who, you know, backed the blue, all of a sudden weren't backing the chief or the police department in that instance. Oh, you're you know, apologizing to that kid. You know, you're apologizing to that rioter. You're apologizing to that. It was incredible. And that was what I took from that. It's really funny how this conditional relationship isn't just with one side.
That's good.
And I think that's just a noteworthy point.
That's good.
I need to go read that post.
It's on there.
But for the chief, I started off by talking about perspective. And I, like I said, my background is in criminal justice, my area is, and I understand that a traffic stop is a very dangerous time for a police officer. I understand that. But the perspective needs to be, it's also a very dangerous time for the citizens.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
We understand that. Yes.
I've never been, I'm not in that situation on a daily basis. I don't know what the circumstances are. I don't know at that moment what the reality
Great
is going
point.
to be 10 minutes from then any more than they know. And they're the ones carrying the gun.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I shared when this comes off and I travel, the same feelings. You asked the question, what do? I do everything as slow as possible.
Keep your hands on the wheel.
Because I don't know who is stopping me, where they come from,
Right.
what their education, training, or any of that is.
But Chief, think about this, and I'm going to come to you, King. I agree with you. I don't know, but 100% of the time when an officer stops you, they're walking up with an advantage. Well, I wouldn't say an advantage, but 100% of the time they have a gun. I don't know what the percentages of time they go to a car that has a gun or stops a car. I'm certain that it's not 100% of the time because I've been stopped several times and I've never had a gun in my car. So if that's the case, it would be more dangerous for the citizen every time.
And there are police departments that have addressed that, because now when you got a broken taillight, your registration is expired, they'll get your license plate and they'll send you a ticket in the mail. And the reason they do that, and all of a sudden you see a lot of these situations falling, these numbers that are showing racial disparity in who gets stopped and who gets searched, they're plummeting because we're realizing, again, war on drugs, you don't need to stop everyone looking for something they did wrong. So let's prevent it. If they're ticky-tacky stuff, driver's license expire, whatever, we'll get them, you know. If there's no other indication or probable cause that they have a gun or they have a weapon or they're transporting drugs up and down I-95, send it in the mail, you know, send it in the mail. Don't stop me and don't look for something I did wrong.
Judge, what do you think about that? I mean, how does that sound?
We could do that here.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. We could do that here in Fayetteville. That could be a policy change.
There are a number of jurisdictions who are going to that stop. And there are folks right here in Cumberland County. In other jurisdictions, I was the chairman of the North Carolina Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparities in the Criminal Justice System. I was on the Sentencing Project Board in Washington, D.C. And those are factors that folks are looking at traffic stop data. And you see a substantial number of stops that fall into the category of regulatory stops or equipment stops.
Yes, sir.
And there are disparities that exist in that regard. And there are efforts that are being made in many jurisdictions across the country to address those issues.
That's a policy issue that could be.
Let's bring it here. Let's bring those solutions here.
I don't see how you can separate the two. The policy is always what drives the action and conduct in number. Quick example, war on drugs. Who was targeted under that policy? Opioids. All of a sudden, the war on drugs, because of a dangerous substance, became a public health issue because the victims of opioids look different. That's a policy-driven factor. Right. So if you take that across the board.
So then what is that policy-driven by?
Governmental entities,
community,
city council, local level. Start there. Start
Creation
there.
of laws,
city council, all the way up. Those are not driven by police departments. Those are driven by governmental entities.
What drives that? Is that the systemic racial issue?
Yeah.
Another example on a historical basis. No, I'm answering your question.
You asking me?
I'm answering your question.
He said he's answering.
I got you.
First vagrancy laws, first lording laws. When did they come about?
After slavery. After slavery.
Jim Crow.
Right.
The purpose of those laws, implemented by politicians, was to use law enforcement entities to supply a labor force.
What you got?
I'm just listening to history.
To supply a labor force.
Right.
Slavery by another name. Read the book.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
No.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. I agree with you. So then policies, the ones that he's speaking about that you're answering the question to, are now driven by the systemic racial issue that we are.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's the problem with the community policing model, is that we've already seen it implemented in certain areas, and all it has meant is that there are more cops in these areas. They just send more and more and more police. So it matters how we implement exactly. And I know that Chief has said that that's not how we're doing, or not necessarily how we're doing it here. We're talking about engaging people, and I get the legitimacy stuff that Assistant Chief had mentioned as well. But that, I guess, if something people are taking away from this conversation as they understand that this is the direction that Fayetteville Police and the City of Fayetteville want to head towards, let's make sure we're doing it the right way. And we're thinking about ways to avoid the pitfalls with even something as nice sounding as community policing, because there's problems with it.
What you thinking, Chaplain?
It's systemic racism. It's at the core of it. We know that. I mean, that's obvious, but what do we do about it? We got to vote. And we, a lot of times we're waiting to the presidential election, but it starts not there. And then we got to educate our people in the communities. And to me, that goes back to the church too.
Sure. No, I was just going to just speak. I think Assistant Chaplain made such a profound statement that'll probably stick with me for a while now. Legitimacy. But that's the end result. There's obviously a process that comes with that. Mr. David used the term perspective. I said stigma. Some may say stereotype. We got to kill. That's the root of it. If we're going to be delivered from, we got to diagnose it. We got to deal with the root issue and then build upon that.
1 second.
I want to let you answer because I think you're making a valid point, but I want to add to it. I apologize.
Okay. So, the legitimacy to me sounds like that end process, but we got to deal with the process of breaking those stigmas, breaking those perspectives. I think that's so powerful. And I think the Fayetteville Police Department is doing a great job in going in that direction, but we got to continue it. And
that's an absolutely important point.
Yes, sir.
But there's another side to it.
Okay.
And I feel obligated to add that other side. Legitimacy is a two-way proposition. It runs both ways.
But I know you're going with that, Judge, but can we and I think Mario's, the responsibility, I feel like, falls on in my opinion, the police department to break those
There's that
stigmas.
power
Well, I agree with you.
That power dynamic.
Well, that goes back to what Gabrielle was saying
it does,
earlier
it does,
about
it
the
does.
power dynamic.
Yeah,
And we
I
started
agree
with
with
the
you. One of the
start
most
conversation
painful
goes
cases I
back.
ever handled was a 15-year-old African-American boy. Was charged with murder. Off the Merc. He had grown up in a horrible environment, lived pretty much on the street, got connected with a gang. Family took him in, a family took him in. He's walking down the street on broad daylight, sees members of an opposing gang, whips out his piece, starts firing it off, missed everybody except the daughter of the family that took him in. Killed her. At sentencing, this was a 15, 16-year-old, I think he was 16 at the time he came before me. At sentencing, I am trying to understand the mindset, the mentality. And his explanation was, everybody got to go sometime. So there are issues in our community that need to be addressed. And I think only can be addressed when there's that open conversation that builds that legitimacy that you're talking about.
Right.
But I also think that we have to recognize and acknowledge that when push comes to shove, there's a need to call folks to come into our communities to address some problems. And that can't necessarily be done without that trust.
Yeah.
That trust factor.
I agree. Totally. Let's go to King.
Listen to all y'all, and maybe this probably add a little bit of perspective. So you said build a relationship, remove stigmas, and everything. So what are you gonna tell? Because the stigma in the neighborhood is talk to the police, right?
Yeah.
Amen. I understand.
So what you gonna tell to that kid or adult that might get their head blown off for talking to the police?
Well, that too.
My youngest brother was shot in the head.
For talk to the police?
No,
That's what I'm saying.
no. My youngest brother was shot in the head by folks in my community in New Jersey.
Okay.
Not because he was talking to the police, but because on the part of some folks in the community, our lives didn't matter.
Definitely, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is, for instance, when I go back to my neighborhood with my friends, and they see a picture of me and the chief,
I understand.
they like, oh, bro, what you
I understand.
and I have to let them know, like, nah, y'all know what I'm out here doing. And that's where the legitimacy of me comes in, because they know how I am.
I hear you.
So what do you tell to somebody that they may not have that name, or people might not know them, but a person they see them talking to one of these officers, they see you seeing them on the news because they got their head blown off because a person thought might have happened. So how do you establish legitimacy in those type of areas with those people? Because that's pretty much where they're not in this conversation. So I'm in here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I hear you.
So I don't know if the
So to King's point, Jeremy, and to everybody's point up there, it took me 3 years to get my wife to marry me.
3.
3 years. And that's fast.
She's still thinking about it.
To get my wife to marry me.
Gotcha. Let's go.
This meeting is not going to fix.
Right.
Amen.
Overnight.
Right.
I think Mario said, I think Brian said, Chief, everybody was wanting, King just admitted it. He's known people in your community your whole life. Right? They know you're legit because they know you your whole life.
Yes.
They know what you mean in your heart and in your mind.
Yes.
I, as a cop, 6'2" white guy, can't walk into your community and say, trust me, I'm legit. You gotta trust me. This is a relationship.
Right.
And if it took me 3 years to convince my wife to marry me, how long is it gonna take me to convince people in your community that I'm legitimate for who I am and I truly have a heart for the community and not for policing and not for enforcement?
So
So
Assist,
that's the
can
that's what we struggle with every day.
I say something to your
Yeah.
point?
Go ahead.
So I look at it, since you use marriage let's look at use marriage for an example. A husband and a wife, they're arguing, because a lot of it, the community and the police, community, they're arguing, this person, this fault. At some point, somebody has to be the bigger person and say, where do we go from here? And I believe, again, going back to that, if it's going to work effectively, it has to be that police department.
I agree with you. I mean, we talked about, I think Gabrielle said it first, the power dynamic.
Right. And
like it's the authority in this relationship.
right.
And the relationship of community policing is the police. You're the authorities. That's what you know.
And Keem asked us like almost an impossible question. It was, go ahead.
No, say it again.
I was just gonna say, I feel like no one's answered Keem's question just yet because he's asking for like legit advice.
Like how do you do it legitimately?
Or how do you actually deal with a community where the distrust is so deep, and we're actually going to harm someone who even tries to begin to establish a relationship.
I think that we're in the vein right now with getting there to this answer, because it's going to have to be these legitimate relationships are going to have to be developed from the legitimacy that we already have on his side. Right. He said that his people are going to respond to him because they know him and he's legit to them. So now officers are going to have to, at the same time, talk to their officers so that when they approach us on whatever side we're on, they have the same level of respect when they're approaching the relationship. Right? No?
Well, I mean, I think very specifically to Keem's situation, and maybe I'll take it back a little bit and just say, if there was a given neighborhood where the distrust was so deep that you would be physically harmed for associating with the police, my answer would be, it depends on what they're up to, right? If all they're up to is just being good friends, sometimes they like to drink outside in the yard and have a good time, and the police still come around and harass them, that's one, that's messed up. Now, if they're doing something that maybe shouldn't be done in the community anyways, well, let me finish, sir. If they're doing something that is so bad that they're almost, terrorizing their neighbors, they might need to, so it depends on what they're doing.
And I'm with you, but I don't think because Keem is saying that. I'm thinking he's just talking the basic.
I'm talking if the community, or rather, if there is a group of folks in a community that are making terroristic threats to their neighbors, if they talk to a police, again, if they're not actually up to anything that's illegitimate.
So we don't have to do hypothetical because he's right here, right? What are you talking
What
about?
are they up to?
Right. And take a picture.
I know, but the reason they don't want you to snitch is because they're doing what?
Right. Absolutely.
Distrust.
I think that's the point.
About what? About what?
About anything.
Period.
Nothing.
Period.
Anything could possibly.
They don't know me. Yeah.
Going back to that segment of people.
Nothing.
Yeah, that's.
So you see what I'm saying? I'm saying it's nothing.
Okay.
We got a question over
We got
here.
another question.
Segment over here. And then we're going to come back to this because this is
No, it's
really
fine.
Yeah, that is.
broad,
Yeah.
because I want you to understand he's saying nothing.
Prayer, just pray,
Just
pray.
showing up. But that's one of the problems. It's difficult for you to understand right now. The African American community feels.
No. I mean, you don't call the cops on somebody in your neighborhood for doing something small, because if you do, they'll come here and they'll do something to like.
He's not saying that. He talked to her. Just spoke to her.
No,
That's the
I understand
culture.
that, but I'm
That's the
saying is that what am I afraid of you revealing? Nothing.
Nothing.
Just, and that's worthy of being shot in the head.
Yes.
Absolutely. Depending on what neighborhood you're in. See, do you see how difficult this is?
Well, no, it's not difficult. I just feel like we're leaving out a detail here.
No. Yeah, what? We got a question over here, then I'll come to you.
I'm Pastor Sharon of the Life Center that's right next to the Tropical Hotel right there, right Boulevard. And so I think one of the things that we have to do is, even in our own neighborhoods, is to create the trust amongst ourselves in our own neighborhoods. There is a distrust amongst even ourselves. And so even in the neighborhood that we are in, we tend to do, what we do is make ourselves visible, even though we're African American, they're African American. We're the church. They don't trust the church. And he said it. And there's a reason for that. And we have to ask ourselves, what's that reason of the mistrust? What's that systemic reason that people don't trust the church. And in doing so, I don't think it is always a racial issue, because African Americans don't trust African Americans.
That's true.
Right.
If we don't support each other, we'll support another race, but we won't support our own race. So I think it is more than just a racial issue here. I think it's a humanity issue.
But that's a part
that we have to address. But then I said, for the young man speaking there, I think that we have to duplicate. You have to duplicate yourself in your community. There needs to be more people like you
Here.
that look like you in your community.
right. Each one reach
Your
one.
community.
Right.
So I just think it's more than just it is a racial issue, but it goes beyond that.
Well, I think that's racial too, but we'll get back to that in just a minute. I'm gonna go to what's
My name's Captain Bird.
Captain Bird.
When I first started on maybe 17 years. Remember how rough that my brand new office? I was scared to death. And then I would start talking to the kids, because the kids were total yellow photos. Start talking to the mamas, start talking to the kids, and it wasn't about me enforcing the law out there. It was me getting to know the community. And I spent every weekend morning out there. I wouldn't give out kids stickers. My daughter would give me books from school, and I would give out books, and then the next week they'd give them back, and we talked, and I knew what the mamas needed. And it became more about being invested in that community, invested in those families. And I never asked, and that's another thing, and I think that law enforcement, we have to understand, like you said, it's about trust. And it's about being honest. And it's about following through when we say something. I'm not going to tell you I won't ever arrest you. Right? But I will tell you, there's a lot of times over there, I might come out and find out how you're doing, what's going on. But I'm never going to put you in a position where, because you have to live in it. I don't. But I want to help you make it a better community. And I started those, and I haven't worked downtown in 14 years. I still get calls from the little, well, they were little then, 19, 20, 21-year-olds are calling me. Their mamas are calling me. I still have guys on B Street calling me to tell me who's doing the shootings over there. They say, this is so-and-so, don't tell, you don't know my name. Oh my God. But that's because I've invested that time. And that's what I teach my officers. It's not a us against them.
That's good.
We're all just, like she said, we're all the same. And it's legit, and it's following up, and it's being honest and truthful, what I can do and what I can't do for you. It's not never lying and following through what I've done.
Like closing statements.
Those are important.
Right.
They did. A lot of those guys called me. Now they call me up now. They wouldn't let their friends know. But they never took it out on anybody else that I talked to, because I didn't go in there with the mindset I'm going to get information from somebody. I'm here to help you. And what can I do to make I don't have a whole lot, but what can I do?
Okay. I think that's a perfect example of what we're trying to get to. If that's, everything, if your example, what you just gave about how you worked in that community and those people still have a relationship with you today, I think that's the line of legitimacy that Chief Nolet is talking about. We got another statement over here.
Good afternoon. I'm Georgia Walker. I'm a volunteer police chaplain with the police department and also a pastor in Massey Hill. And being in Massey Hill, we see a lot of different things, a lot of different people. And I think I heard you, Chief, at the start of this meeting, you mentioned Jane Elliott.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had the privilege of being, I was in the military. I retired here in Fayetteville, but when I was in the military, I went to the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute in Cocoa Beach, Florida. And I was privileged to be in a session with Jane Elliott. And it's an eye-opener. I don't know if you've ever been, if you've ever experienced it. It's something totally different. But one of the things I think that, well, I know that we're dealing with, not just in Fayetteville, but the nationwide, is expectations. And even in churches, when people come to your church and they join your church, they have expectations.
Yeah.
And when those expectations are not met, then that's when there's an issue.
Yeah.
I think that's what we have going on in the policing, is expectations of what we feel police officers should be and should do when they come in our communities. And I think the police officers have expectations of how we, the citizens, should relate to them. But along with that, the reason I brought up Jane Elliott is because you can go into a session with Jane Elliott. You're going to come out a different person.
Oh, yes.
But how long would that last? I was also taught about a C, S-E-E, a significant emotional event. And when you have that significant emotional event, it will cause you to either rethink what you're doing or either try to get an understanding as to what you're doing, because it allows you to see that what you was thinking really wasn't think that you should be thinking. It also awakens something in you to let you know that you wasn't the one that was right. With all the things that we have here in this community, when I went to the police academy, my eyes was open up to the police department. Didn't know they had so many working parts. When I come to coffee with the mayor and I go to the Faith Forum, I'm learning more about the community where I serve. I'm learning more about the people that are here that I work with to serve. The toy drive that we're gonna have, those toys are gonna be sent to the DSS for the kids that are in foster care. What better way to touch the community than to give back to the kids that did not ask to be in that program? So when we are sitting and we're having conversations, we can talk about systemic racism, but to that child that would get that toy on Christmas, that don't really matter. So as we are sitting here and we're talking, I hear it, good conversation, but we got to understand there is something on the inside of us that make us who we are. And we have to understand whether we have a significant emotional event or not, we have to understand that there is something greater than what's inside this room.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, Kelly.
I'm going to say that. I want to be here. So she said something that I've been holding in, but I think you said, when she says perceive. You got to remember, you have to change what we see. Just think about it also. I've been doing this for as long as you have about 25 years, right? And we only get called to people's homes at their very worst. So imagine that multiplied, and you see from baby deaths to grown folk deaths, just the worst of the worst. And we do things as a department, as an agency to help, right? But we tend to do them or with the folks, or young folks in particular, who quote unquote need the help. So what we need to focus on more as a society is show the best of the best. Because we always see the worst of the worst. So I always get frustrated when we don't give good kids attention, right? But what that does is it shows, you know what, the good side of Black kids. So he doesn't assume that all little kids that are Black are bad. So we're conditioned to see things are bad. Help us change to see conditions that are good. And I totally understand that point, right? The reality, though, is that may be tough to do, right? I agree with you. In the event that that's tough to do, because you guys, this is your chosen profession, right? You have to at least understand that this is what you chose. I saw a meme the other day, and I don't know if I still got it. but it was in regards to Black Lives Matter and policing and Blue Lives Matter. And I'm trying to find it. I don't know if I still got it, but to speak to the point that you're making, let's see. And it's not the totality of your point, but it's in the situation, and it's in regards to the choice. While I understand that you're called at the absolute worst, it is still your choice, right? So I read this. It said, blue lives don't exist. Stop drawing equivalencies between racial identity and a job. Your career is a choice. Being Black isn't. So in these situations where we're saying, well, we want to let you see a better side to, which I understand, when you're called to these situations that are terrible, absolutely terrible, what is it that sometimes make police make them worse?
Being there.
What is it that because sometimes you make it worse when you respond.
Yeah, you asking me that clearly because I'm the only one who can
well,
respond.
you know, here's the other part of that is that they were talking. They started talking too. They ain't had no business to talk. You know?
So I don't know if that's how you perceive what Chief Kelly was saying.
No. I didn't perceive that. I totally understood what he said in the sense that he believes that you guys are called at the absolute worst moment of an individual's life.
So to answer your question, what makes officers make bad decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And do respond improperly, react out. For me, it's going to be lack of training, lack of experience, lack of exposure, lack of empathy. It's a multitude of things. It takes years of understanding, training, developing yourself as an individual to be an outstanding officer, but you got to start with a good character. So that's why recruiting for the character is way more important than recruiting for the skills. So recruiting for finding that human that has most of that in the beginning makes life so much easier when you start adding on to the training of other things. And then that doesn't promise you're going to have it all that you figured out, because you still have the element of ignorance that can come and play. Right. But that's still, the onus is on us to train and expose and teach and listen and have these opportunities.
So that segues into the next question. I think it's from Pandora on our Zoom, directly for you, Chief. In what you just gave us, her question is, what are you doing specifically to build trust in our communities, to enact a more stable community policing policy?
Yeah, so what we have been doing, because it's more than just me, it's every person on the police department. Not only do we have our different programs to make sure outside of the training, outside of the accountability training that should be standard, on top of the training of experience of how to talk to people, relationship, doing the ability to receive complaints, investigate different things happening. There is the opportunity to have more sessions of listening, more sessions of you tell us what you think you want us to, when we come to the community and do. We have our manpower resources, and we're looking for just an event that you say you want us to come and build this relationship. We already have our faith forum. We have things in play. Citizens Police Academy. We're doing a lot of different things where we got Operation Ceasefire, but we also know that doesn't cover everybody in the community, right? Mm-hmm. But we're open to say, you tell me what else I can do outside what I'm doing right, what we are doing, not just me, what we are doing right now, which is trying to be as transparent as possible, being as honest as possible, as sincere as possible, confronting when I say something short to my command staff or my department, like, okay, I could have said that better, or taking my time to grow and learn, really just being vulnerable. That's what we have been doing or tried to do, is being vulnerable. We've come some ways. We will always be on mission to get better from yesterday. That's who we want to be as character ethically in our profession. But I am open to tell us what tell us.
Right,
what
and
we
that
wanna
was
do.
my next question to the other panel. What do you
Your
want to see?
office still involved with Great Oak?
Great Oak and doing what in Great Oak?
Yeah. Yeah. Back in the day, I was on the board of Great Oak after I left the bench. And we had Fayetteville police officers who participated in that, who supported us in a number of events.
Yeah.
Working with them, most of the young men in Great Oak were single parent households, no male figure in their lives. And we partnered, that was a number of years ago, with members of the Fayetteville Police Department in doing that.
But as we do things and as we implement opportunities like this, we don't do it to check a box. We do it with the end result, which is you tell us what's your feedback? Where do we go? Which community wants us there to have a bigger impact? And what is the end result? We want to think it out. We want to say, okay, how is this going to play out? How is this relationship going to be built? Is this another opportunity? Do we keep building upon this? Do we have a second conversation? And then this is good. Now, how can we double that, duplicate that? How can we make that relationship bigger?
So for the other three guests on the panel, what would you like to see? Or what do you think would be important in order to make community policing more effective in the community?
As far as activity events or
and on Zoom, tell us.
Community policing writ large.
I think that we're doing some of those things. Obviously, I've talked to Chief about other events that we could do, but I think that question should go far beyond just people in this room. Maybe we should reach out to other people, like people that Rakeem represent and those other type of individuals. I think that question is broad, but I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. But I think that question should reach beyond just those who are in.
Absolutely, and I'm just asking in terms of your own catchment. What do you feel for you is important?
Well, I don't think that there's enough time on the planet to train police officers for all the things that that are expected of them right now. I don't think it's fair to sort of keep having police officers feel like they've got to be 10 different things all at once. We're setting our police up for failure when they're having to go to a domestic violence situation, having to resuscitate, a child who's, choking on something. And then they're dealing with, a violent crime. And then they're supposed to give good customer service when they pull you over. I mean, just a human being's, ability to just maintain some kind of stoic, emotional state at all times. It's volatile. And so this goes back to, again, do we just want to increase the number of interactions that police have with people that give rise to issues of discrimination or issues of police brutality? That is the wrong version of community policing, just to send more officers into these neighborhoods. I said in the beginning, and I'm gonna have to reiterate it now, is that doing that is turning neighborhood problems into police problems, and police solve problems by putting you in cuffs. So we're sending the wrong people to try and resolve these things. So community policing really should be, community public safety, right? All of a sudden, again, those defund arguments come up. We're investing in the wrong solutions. So if we're going to be doing, anything related to the community to increase public safety, it probably doesn't actually need to be with the guys with the guns, trying to be your therapist, your doctor, your social service person, the person can help you get a job, the person can get you into college. There's other people actually trained and educated to do that, and they'll do it better than any police officer who's going to have to try and be a Swiss Army knife for everything. Violent crimes and issues, that require that kind of law enforcement. Professor Friedman, I listened to Professor Friedman in one of those committee meetings say it himself. 80-90% of phone calls to the police are not for violent crimes. That's not what they're being called for. So why are we still expecting police to do majority of that work?
So Mario,
yes, sir. No, that was it. That was it.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump to the chapter, and then because we only have about 15 minutes, I'm gonna come through the panel really quickly so that you guys can give me what's your closing
Yeah,
thought
we're doing
is,
5.
and then I will tell everybody to have a good weekend.
Yep.
Well, I think they're already doing, the Fayetteville Police Department is already doing a lot of things as far as involving the community, but are the right people or the people that they need to reach being reached? So that goes back to getting the right people at the table. I don't know what that looks like and how to do it, but we got to reach the right, because they do a lot of things. I see them doing it. Do they know what they're doing? I don't know. So that goes back to the community. So how do we not keep them from keep running the same tables? If we keep the same wheel, doing the same thing over.
I agree.
So we got to find out, what does the other communities want, like the communities that Keem are from. What do we need to do? You got to invite us in. You got to tell us, because if we're already doing it and you're not there, how do we get involved? How do we build relationships? And I'm saying that because I see what they're doing.
Okay. I agree with you. I'm going to stand right here real quick because we're about to shut this
Yep.
thing down in a few seconds.
Oh, really?
I'm going to get, guys, I want to thank you for joining us for the Faith&Blue critical conversation that we've had here today. I think that it's a great start. Obviously, we got an end game in mind, and hopefully the next time we can go even further than we've gone today. Thank everybody for showing up. I want to thank all of our panelists for coming and being a part of this today. We're going to give them a few minutes to kind of like give us some closing, a closing statement about what they felt today, where they see us going, and hopefully you guys will tell somebody and connect with us again the next time. I'm your host right now. Right now, we're going to start it. Right. Yes, Chief, you're going to go last. But thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, first and foremost, thank you again for this opportunity. It was a privilege and an honor to be a part. For last closing arguments, I would love, born and raised here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, pastoring a ministry here that God is really blessing numerically and spiritually. And I just want us to do, there was a while back we did a protest where we were, I don't know if we were one of the first, but we were definitely an example of unity when we kneeled with the police officers. And it was a sign of solidarity and unity. It was a beginning start. I would like for us to also be an example of what community policing looks like, an example of a healthy relationship between our community and those who live here, and be an example to the world so that they can see that it's possible. So that's all I have to say. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Hawkins. I mean, thanks everyone for listening to all of us. You know, I definitely want to be as engaged as I can. I want to be able to serve in every capacity that I can, which is why I'm getting my law degree, which is why I want to come back to Fayetteville, which is why I'm participating in Citizen Police Academy, because I think these are the issue that my generation needs to be front and center on. I think for too long, you know, we thought that this was something that can't be improved on, that there is no reform, that there is no change. And I think we recognize now that that's just an imperative. So I want to see policy changes. I think, you know, there's so many great officers who will talk to you and communicate with you, invite you in. But at a certain point, that just becomes performative. At a certain point, I want to see pen to paper, and I want to see policy changes in your general orders. I want to see actual recognition, not just in words, but in actions, in how you approach, you know, these crimes that are ruining people's lives, could potentially end someone's life. And I think the other really big thing I want to see is that independent police oversight, civilian oversight. We see it in other communities. I think that is what legitimacy can stem from. That's where the power dynamic all of a sudden shifts away from being just amongst the police and now with the citizens who know that, you know, when something goes wrong, that there will be consequences. Because right now, the police barely get fired, let alone prosecuted for things that they do wrong. So if we can address that in some important, very tangible way, that's how we become the city of Fayetteville an example for the rest of the state and the rest of the country. So that's what I'm looking forward to make happen. Is that a political thing? Is that a policy thing? It doesn't matter. It's going to happen, and we'll make it happen one way or the other. It's a matter of when, not if. So that's why I think these conversations are important, because essentially we're letting everyone know out there, look forward to this. That's the direction we're heading. We're not going to stay where we're at. We're not going to accept the status quo any longer. We're going to make sure that our community is actually made safer for everyone, and not just the same folks who would like the police to be their, you know, personal sort of attack force towards certain communities. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing change. And if anyone out there is, you know, interested in this kind of stuff, get involved, you know, whether that's, you know, with a city commission or a city board, certainly with voting, and then just organizing, whether that's, you know, demonstrations like we've seen already, but we got to keep the pressure on our city council and our elected leadership. Because what happens the last time we try to get a citizens review board, people just forgot about it. The temperatures went down, time went past, the motivation wasn't there anymore. And the thing is, most of the time, police aren't going to, any entity, not just the police, are going to, you know, strip themselves of the power that they already have. You've got to take power. It is not given up willingly. So that's where we have to see that policy change, elected officials who actually have the guts to make changes and not be afraid of a certain segment of this community and be retaliated against for doing something like defunding the police or instituting a review board.
Thank you so much, Mario. Your Honor.
We're living in a divided time and a divided country. We are in a pivotal point in our history. And we have to begin somewhere. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation, to begin the dialogue that leads, hopefully, prayerfully, to a recognition that we have much more in common than that which divides us, and that we can work together to make our community, our state, and our country better. So I'm happy for the opportunity.
Yes. I just want to say thank you too for the opportunity. And I think one thing we got to do today is grasp hold of a working definition of what community policing looks like. And I think as we continue conversations, and I am elated to see what's going to happen after this as we put pen to paper and feet to what we're getting ready to do.
Absolutely.
So thanks.
Absolutely.
So first of all, thank you, Jeremy, for moderating. You did an awesome job. Thank the panel for being here. I think us being here and everyone being vulnerable is part of trust, is part of the opportunity to realize I know we are leading in our city, period, on best practices because we didn't just get here overnight. We have been questioned, challenged over the years along the way, having DLJ come in, having other people come in and evaluate the police department, doing self-evaluation, listening to the community, trying to really think different. What we talk about reimagining the police, what that really means. All the officers, everyone who works in the police department takes the uniform off when they go to bed, period. Takes it off and will not do this for a lifetime, haven't been doing it for a lifetime. So I know my commitment is I want to live where ideally I can be safe, no matter where I am, and my family can be safe. What does that look like? That looks like me trying to be as educated as possible about society, my neighbors, my community, and teaching my family and someone else. And it's really about empowerment in this dark times of divide, you know, in this stripped off time of we are straight up divided and it may get worse, prepare for it, but then still have the hope and I still have the faith. I have the faith. That's why we're here. And I know we are going to get better. So I invite the community to have a voice and come and say, you know what, I got an idea of how you can come to my community and get engaged. It's just a phone call. It's just a conversation. It didn't have to come to me. You got captains in the district, you see officers, but it can just be a phone call. Bring an idea. We're always open to ideas, and it just doesn't come from the police department. It comes from, well, let's see how this can work out so we can build, plan out, and not be quick to a knee-jerk reaction. And one thing I know Mario said it, talking about the ticketing from electronic, right? One thing that may, before you make that decision, that's an automatic ticket possibility, which take you to an automatic court system, which is an automatic fine, which builds up automatic issues. Think about that before that becomes an automatic decision. You know, so, and I'm thinking big picture, right? I only know the numbers of 3.5 years since 2017, but statistically, in Fayetteville, just Fayetteville, no, if you get stopped, you are 3 times as likely to get a warning citation in Fayetteville. That's just since 2017. I don't know what other communities have. I don't know what that looks like. It still takes the whole nervousness from the person being stopped, but 3 times likely on anything across the board, you're likely to get a warning. If you make it automatic, you're going to get a fine that you have to go to court and have issues. So just we're okay, whatever the community wants, but think of what that may look like at the end. And ultimately, we want to do this again. This is great this first year. Can't wait. Don't forget, please don't forget those drop-offs for the toys for DDS is going to be at the all police department stations. If you don't know, look on the website. Then we'll be in 2 communities this weekend with a cleanup, helping two different communities.
Mm-hmm.
Operation Ceasefire is happening tonight off of Rim Road at the church. Drive-in movie night. We'll have other social distancing, but we'll have hot chocolate. I know it's ice cream, but we'll be out there showing the movie Black Panther, the Marvel movie. So please come out and join us starting at 6 o'clock. Is that correct? Starting at 6 o'clock on Rim Road. Look on our Facebook page and please come out and come have a conversation with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Listen,
Hawkins.
and we got to do this. We got to thank all of the officers
Yes.
who actually came out. For those of you who aren't, just kind of really put it together real quick. For our chief and her command, we are absolutely grateful that you are here in Fayetteville with us, right? I know that we're in a very divided country at a very divided time, but right now we are blessed, and I wanted to acknowledge that publicly and openly. All right, guys, it's time to go get some donuts.
No donuts, no donuts.
Good job. This is good.
Thank you, y'all. Appreciate you.